You don't fall in love with the wrong person all at once. You fall in love one small excuse at a time until the truth becomes too loud to ignore. There's a moment in almost every relationship where your intuition whispers something uncomfortable. It's quiet at first, so quiet that you can easily pretend it isn't there. But the strange thing about intuition is that it rarely shouts. It simply waits for you to stop lying to yourself. Most people think choosing the wrong partner happens because someone deceived them, but the deeper truth is far more unsettling. The wrong relationships usually continue not because the signs weren't there, but because we explained them away, and the mind is incredibly talented at protecting the fantasy we want to believe. When you meet someone new, your brain floods with chemicals designed to bond you quickly. Attraction narrows your perception. You focus on their smile, their charm, the way they look at you across a room. Your brain begins filling in the blanks with the story you want to live. But a relationship is not built on moments, it's built on patterns. And patterns tell the truth long before people do. The first warning sign is subtle, almost invisible. Most people don't recognize it until months or years later. And when they finally do, the realization hits them like a quiet earthquake. The first sign you're dating the wrong person is this. You constantly feel the need to explain their behavior to other people. Pay attention to that. If you find yourself saying things like, they didn't mean it like that, or they're just going through a stressful time, or they're actually really sweet once you get to know them, something deeper is happening. Because when someone consistently treats you with care, respect, and clarity, you never feel the need to defend them. Healthy relationships don't require public relations campaigns. But when you're with the wrong person, your mind starts working overtime to maintain the image you wish were true. Your friends notice things you don't. They notice how your energy changes when that person walks into the room. They notice the tension in your voice when you talk about certain arguments. They notice the way you pause before answering simple questions about your relationship. But you defend them anyway. Why? Because once we emotionally invest in someone, admitting they might not be right for us feels like admitting we made a mistake, and the human ego hates that feeling. So instead of confronting the reality, we adjust the story. We say they're complicated. We say they've been hurt before. We say they're working on themselves. And sometimes that's true. But here's the question most people are afraid to ask themselves. Are you witnessing genuine growth? Or are you just waiting for someone to become the person you imagined they were at the beginning? There is a dangerous psychological trap in relationships. It's called potential attachment. You fall in love with who someone could be instead of who they consistently show you they are. And potential is one of the most seductive illusions in human psychology. Because potential always lives in the future. It promises that things will change. It promises that one day they'll understand you. It promises that eventually they'll treat you the way you deserve. But relationships don't live in potential. They live in the present, and the present always reveals the truth. Watch how someone handles small conflicts. Watch how they speak to you when they're stressed. Watch how they react when you express a need or boundary. These moments are far more revealing than romantic gestures. Because anyone can be charming when things are easy, but real character reveals itself when life becomes inconvenient. Here's another uncomfortable truth most people never talk about. When you're dating the wrong person, your nervous system starts living in a constant state of emotional uncertainty. You don't feel secure, but you also don't feel completely ready to leave. You feel suspended. One day, things feel amazing. The connection feels electric. They say the right things. They make you feel chosen. The next day, something shifts. They become distant, cold, dismissive. And suddenly, you're trying to figure out what you did wrong. That emotional roller coaster creates something psychologists call intermittent reinforcement. It's the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. Unpredictable rewards create the strongest attachments, so the less consistent someone becomes, the harder your brain works to win back their attention. You start overanalyzing every message, every tone of voice, every delayed reply, and without realizing it, your emotional world begins orbiting around their moods. But here's the question you must ask yourself honestly. Is this love, or is this emotional survival? Because love does not feel like constantly trying to earn stability. Love feels like emotional safety. It feels like being able to relax inside someone's presence. It feels like clarity, not confusion, not constant interpretation. not decoding hidden meanings. The wrong person will slowly train you to question your instincts. You'll begin ignoring the subtle signals your intuition sends you. You'll silence the part of your mind that says something doesn't feel right. And the longer that happens, the more disconnected you become from your own inner compass. That is why people often stay in the wrong relationships far longer than they should. Not because they are weak, but because the human heart is hopeful. Hope is beautiful. But misplaced hope can keep you trapped in situations that quietly drain your life energy. The right person will never make you feel like loving them requires abandoning your own clarity. They won't require endless explanations. They won't make you shrink your needs just to keep peace. And they won't leave you constantly wondering where you stand, because the right relationship doesn't slowly erode your sense of self. It strengthens it. The truth is, most people don't leave the wrong person because of one massive betrayal. They leave after hundreds of small moments where something inside them whispered, "This isn't right." And eventually, that whisper becomes impossible to ignore. But the second warning sign is even more dangerous, because it disguises itself as passion, when in reality, it's something far more destructive. And if you've ever felt emotionally exhausted in a relationship but couldn't explain why, you're about to understand exactly what's happening. Some relationships don't fall apart because people stop caring. They fall apart because caring slowly turns into emotional exhaustion. And here's the dangerous part. Most people mistake emotional chaos for passion. Think about it. When a relationship is filled with intense highs and crushing lows, it feels powerful. It feels dramatic. It feels like something out of a movie. Your heart races. Your emotions swing wildly. You feel alive, but also strangely drained. And because it's intense, you tell yourself it must be real love. But intensity is not the same thing as emotional health. In fact, one of the clearest warning signs you're dating the wrong person is when your relationship constantly feels like a storm you're trying to survive. One week, things feel incredible. They're affectionate, attentive, they talk about the future, they make you feel like the most important person in the world. Then suddenly, something changes. They pull away, they become cold, they stop communicating the way they did before. And now you're left sitting there, replaying conversations in your mind, wondering what shifted. This cycle creates something that feels like attachment, but it's actually emotional instability. The second warning sign you're dating the wrong person is this: your relationship has no emotional consistency. Consistency is one of the most underrated qualities in a healthy partnership. Not perfection, not constant happiness. Consistency. The right person doesn't leave you guessing who they're going to be from one week to the next. Their care doesn't disappear when they're slightly inconvenienced. Their respect doesn't vanish during disagreements. But the wrong person often creates a pattern where affection is given and then suddenly withdrawn. And when that happens repeatedly, something subtle begins changing inside your mind. You begin working harder, harder to please them, harder to avoid conflict, harder to keep the peace. Slowly, without even realizing it, the relationship becomes less about connection and more about emotional management. You start monitoring their moods. You think carefully before bringing up problems. You hesitate to express your needs because you're afraid it might create tension. And that's the moment a relationship stops being equal. It becomes unbalanced. The truth about healthy love is surprisingly simple. You shouldn't feel like you're walking on emotional eggshells. If someone's presence constantly requires you to regulate yourself in order to avoid upsetting them, something is deeply off balance. Now here's where things become psychologically complicated. Humans are naturally drawn to emotional intensity. Your brain remembers the powerful highs, the moments where they made you feel special, the late-night conversations, the passionate connection. And every time things go bad, your mind searches for those moments again. You keep thinking, if we could just get back to how things felt at the beginning. But the beginning of a relationship is often not the reality of the relationship. It's the audition phase. During the early stage, people show their best sides. They invest heavily, they create attraction, they try to win your attention. But real character reveals itself over time: how someone handles frustration, how they respond to boundaries, how they communicate during disagreements. These moments reveal whether someone is emotionally mature or emotionally reactive. And emotional reactivity is one of the most destructive forces inside relationships. Because when someone lacks emotional control, every small issue becomes a large conflict. Simple conversations turn into arguments, concerns turn into accusations, and suddenly the relationship becomes a cycle of repairing damage that shouldn't have happened in the first place. Healthy partners don't create unnecessary emotional turbulence, they create emotional stability. That doesn't mean you'll never disagree. Every relationship has conflict. But the difference lies in how conflict is handled. With the wrong person, conflict feels like a battle. Voices rise, blame spreads, defensiveness takes over, and instead of solving the issue, both people walk away feeling worse than before. With the right person, conflict feels like problem solving. You still disagree, you still have moments of frustration, but the goal isn't to win, the goal is to understand. When you're dating the wrong person, arguments often leave you feeling smaller, less heard, less respected, less secure. But with the right person, even difficult conversations eventually strengthen the bond, because both people are committed to growth instead of ego. And this brings us to something many people quietly experience but rarely talk about: emotional fatigue. Have you ever noticed how some relationships leave you feeling mentally drained even when nothing dramatic has happened? You leave a conversation feeling heavy, you spend hours thinking about what was said, you feel tension sitting quietly in the back of your mind. That feeling is not random. Your nervous system is incredibly intelligent. It constantly scans for emotional safety. When someone's behavior is unpredictable, dismissive, or manipulative, your brain remains in a low-level stress state. And the longer that continues, the more exhausted you become. You may not even realize the relationship is draining you until you step away from it. Suddenly, your mind feels lighter. Your energy returns, you feel more like yourself again. That's when many people finally understand something powerful. Love should not feel like emotional survival, it should feel like emotional support. A good relationship gives you energy, it makes life feel easier to navigate. It becomes a place where you recharge, not a place where you slowly lose yourself. But the third warning sign is the one that most people completely miss. It hides behind kindness. It hides behind patience. It hides behind the belief that love means enduring anything. And because it's disguised so well, millions of people stay in the wrong relationship far longer than they ever should. Once you recognize it, you'll never see relationships the same way again. There is a silent habit that keeps millions of people trapped in the wrong relationship. It doesn't look toxic. It doesn't look dramatic. In fact, from the outside, it can even look loyal, patient, loving. But underneath it, slowly erodes your self-respect. The third warning sign you're dating the wrong person is this: you constantly shrink parts of yourself just to keep the relationship peaceful. This one is dangerous because it happens gradually. At the beginning, you speak freely. You share your opinions. You express your boundaries without hesitation. You feel comfortable being fully yourself. But over time, something subtle begins to change. Maybe you notice they react poorly when you disagree with them. Maybe they become distant when you express certain needs. Maybe they mock certain interests you have, or dismiss things that matter deeply to you. At first, you brush it off. It seems small. You tell yourself it's not worth turning into a big issue. So the next time that situation appears, you adjust slightly. You hold back a comment. You soften an opinion. You decide not to mention something that bothered you. And just like that, the first piece of yourself quietly disappears from the relationship. But the human mind is incredibly adaptive. Once you adjust once, it becomes easier to adjust again. Weeks pass, months pass, and without realizing it, you begin editing yourself in ways that would have shocked you at the beginning. You avoid certain conversations, you hide certain emotions, you downplay things that matter to you, not because you suddenly stopped caring, but because you've learned that expressing them creates tension, so you sacrifice honesty for peace. But peace built on silence is not real peace. It's quiet resentment waiting for the right moment to surface. This is where many people misunderstand the idea of compromise. Healthy relationships absolutely require compromise. But compromise should happen around preferences, not identity. Choosing what movie to watch, that's compromise. Deciding how to spend a weekend, that's compromise. But if you feel like you must constantly minimize your thoughts, your values, your personality, or your voice, that's not compromise. That's slow emotional self-erasure. And the scariest part is how normal it begins to feel, because humans naturally adapt to their environment. If someone repeatedly reacts negatively to certain behaviors, your brain learns to avoid those behaviors. It's a survival instinct. But in relationships, survival instincts can lead you into a quiet form of emotional imprisonment. You start thinking things like, "It's just easier if I don't bring that up. I'll just let it go. It's not worth another argument." So you carry the weight silently. You tell yourself love requires sacrifice, and in some ways it does. But love should never require the permanent abandonment of who you are. A relationship should expand your life, not shrink it. When you're with the right person, you feel encouraged to grow into more of yourself. Your ideas are welcomed. Your personality is appreciated. Even your differences are respected. But when you're with the wrong person, you begin filtering yourself. And eventually, something unsettling happens. You stop recognizing the version of yourself inside the relationship. Maybe you used to be more confident, more playful, more outspoken, more curious, but now you feel quieter, more cautious, more restrained. And sometimes people blame themselves for this shift. They think maybe they're just becoming more mature, maybe they're learning to be more patient. But deep down, there's a subtle discomfort. Because authenticity has been replaced with careful performance, and performing a role every day is exhausting. You may still love the person, you may still care deeply, but something inside you feels compressed, like a version of yourself is trapped behind a wall you slowly built. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The longer you stay in a relationship where you can't fully be yourself, the harder it becomes to remember who you were before it. Your brain adapts to the new normal. You forget how freely you once spoke. You forget how naturally you once laughed. You forget how confidently you once made decisions. That's why some people feel an almost shocking sense of relief when a relationship finally ends. Not because the breakup itself feels good, but because they suddenly feel space to breathe again, space to speak again, space to exist again. A healthy partner doesn't require you to shrink in order for the relationship to function. They don't make your authenticity feel inconvenient. They don't punish your honesty with distance or criticism. Instead, they create an environment where both people can be fully human. Flaws included, disagreements included, growth included. And here's the truth many people only realize years later. The right relationship will challenge you, but it will never suffocate you. It will ask you to grow, but it will never demand that you disappear. If you constantly feel like you must edit your personality just to maintain harmony, your intuition is trying to tell you something important. And ignoring that signal for too long leads to the fourth warning sign. This one is the most revealing of all, because it has nothing to do with arguments, nothing to do with attraction, nothing to do with communication. It reveals itself through a single powerful question that most people are afraid to answer honestly. And once you ask yourself that question, the truth about your relationship becomes impossible to hide. There is a question most people avoid asking themselves when they're in a relationship. Not because they don't know the answer, but because the answer would force them to face a truth they're not ready to accept. The fourth warning sign you're dating the wrong person is hidden inside this one question. Do you feel more like yourself with them or less? Think about that carefully, because the right relationship does something powerful to your life. It doesn't just give you companionship, it strengthens who you already are. You feel more confident making decisions, more motivated to grow, more emotionally stable, more optimistic about your future, not because your partner is perfect, but because the relationship itself becomes a supportive environment where both people thrive. But when you're with the wrong person, something very different happens. Your world slowly becomes smaller. Your emotional energy becomes focused on maintaining the relationship instead of building your life. You begin sacrificing opportunities, friendships fade, personal goals get delayed, and without realizing it, your growth quietly slows down. Not in a dramatic way, in small, almost invisible ways. Maybe you stop pursuing certain interests because your partner dismisses them. Maybe you spend less time with friends because it causes tension. Maybe you avoid chasing certain ambitions because the relationship demands so much emotional attention. At first, these sacrifices seem reasonable. Relationships require time, they require investment. But there's a massive difference between investing in a relationship and losing yourself inside one. The right partner doesn't compete with your growth. They support it. They celebrate your progress. They encourage your ambitions. They feel proud watching you become stronger, smarter, happier, because your growth doesn't threaten them. It inspires them. But the wrong person often reacts very differently. When you start evolving, they become uncomfortable. When you gain confidence, they subtly criticize. When you focus on personal goals, they accuse you of neglecting the relationship. Suddenly, your growth feels like a problem. And here's the painful psychological trap. Because you care about them, you begin adjusting your behavior to avoid that tension. You slow down. You hold back. You shrink your ambitions just enough to keep the peace. But peace built on self-limitation is one of the most expensive emotional prices a person can pay. Years pass quickly. Opportunities disappear quietly. And one day, many people wake up with a painful realization. They didn't just stay in the wrong relationship, they paused their own life while doing it. This is why the most successful long-term relationships share one powerful trait: mutual expansion. Both people grow stronger because of the relationship. Both people feel supported in becoming better versions of themselves. Both people feel inspired to pursue their goals while also building something together. The relationship becomes fuel, not friction. But with the wrong person, the relationship becomes a constant emotional negotiation. You negotiate your time, your energy, your dreams, your personality, your peace of mind, and eventually you reach a moment where something inside you asks a quiet but terrifying question. What would my life look like if I walked away? Many people push that question away immediately, because leaving means uncertainty. Starting over feels intimidating. Ending something familiar can feel painful, even if the relationship isn't healthy. But here's the deeper truth most people discover later. The fear of leaving the wrong person is often smaller than the regret of staying too long. Time is the one resource you can never recover. Every year you spend in a relationship that limits your growth is a year you could have spent building a life that energizes you. This doesn't mean every relationship that struggles is wrong. All couples face difficult seasons. Life creates pressure. Stress happens. People make mistakes. But there is a powerful difference between temporary struggles and a pattern that slowly diminishes who you are. If your relationship consistently leaves you feeling smaller, less confident, less peaceful, and less inspired about your future, your intuition is trying to protect you, because the right person won't make you feel like loving them costs you your identity. They won't make you feel like growth must be sacrificed for connection. They won't leave you constantly wondering whether the relationship is helping your life or quietly holding it back. The right relationship feels like alignment, two people moving forward, not one person slowly standing still. And if you're honest with yourself, deep down you probably already know which direction your relationship is moving. That quiet feeling in your chest, the one that appears during certain conversations, the one that shows up after certain arguments, that feeling is your inner compass, and ignoring it doesn't make it disappear. It only makes the lesson arrive later. So here's the question I want you to answer honestly. Not for anyone else, just for yourself. When you imagine your future 5 years from now, does the person you're with make that vision feel bigger or smaller? Take a moment and really think about that. Then tell me in the comments, which of these warning signs have you experienced in a relationship? Your story might help someone else realize something they've been afraid to admit. If this message resonated with you, take 1 second to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with a friend who might need to hear this today. Because sometimes the truth we avoid the most is the truth that finally sets us free.